Okay, today, I can get this set up here. So, okay, today we're going to talk about APA, and I did this last semester with another class explaining APA and recorded the class. So for all of you to be able to also go back to this video, I'm going to share some websites with you also that will help you with APA. Today's discussion, I think, not only will help you for this class, but also other classes where you have to write APA. Here at the university, as you know, most of your essays require APA. So a lot of things we talk about will obviously apply for this unit, Unit 3, where we'll be asked to write an argumentative essay, including some references. But it'll also, I think, help you in other classes. Okay, so I'm going to do a screen share here and share some websites that I think will be useful. And what I'd like to share here, or show you, first is a website that I created, and with you today for APA. Okay, so let me get this going here. So in our class, if you go into Creative and Academic Writing, and you go to Announcements, I have to say, the web that I created to include some information, some things, some tips, I think that will help you with APA. So I just want to show you here, you all have this link, and this will take you to this website where there are other links and videos and tips about APA. All right, so there's videos here, there's links. I have, in fact, these are the notes I just generated this morning that we can talk about today. And here's a link if you just want to ask a question. You can click here, ask a question, post it, and I'll try to respond to that if you have a very specific question. But most of the information that's found on this website help, and things that we also help. So even though some notes we're talking about, please take notes, and so you have this information with you. And if you have questions, we're going to be looking at your questions. Okay. All right. Let's take a look here at APA notes. And this is not everything with APA. Okay, APA is manual. It's about 2 or 3 inches thick. There's a lot of detail, and we don't expect you to know everything about APA. What we talk about today are just a few aspects that take care of 95% of the problems that I've seen here at the university. Okay, these concepts that I've planned to talk about today. So in these notes, this first link is the link to the page we just saw. And I've also included 2 links that you will find useful here at the university. This is the virtual library. And these 2 links, one is the license database. Okay, and I've mentioned some examples here. EBSCO, the eBrary, which is for books, complete books can be found here in this website. Gale, and there's some others. But these are some of the main databases that you'll be able to use, as well as an open access virtual library. In your notes, I would include this open access, write out ERIC, E-R-I-C, 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 if you want to add those to your notes. And this is a free database that also will help you find some articles that you'll find useful. Today I'm not going to talk a lot about the virtual library, but if you do have questions, we can talk about that later if you're not sure about how to get into the library, the virtual library. But all of you as students here at the university have access to these databases for free, both here at the university or if you're accessing it from your home or outside the university. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start here on the first point, and in your notes again, just try to paraphrase what I'm saying, write down whatever makes sense for you, but try to have something in your notes even though I have a lot written out here. The first thing I'd like to talk about is that we need to distinguish between what is an original idea and what is not an original idea. Okay, so an original idea might be an original idea is something that you come up with that is not coming from an outside source, that's not coming from an expert. If you are citing an idea that is not an original idea, it's coming from somebody else, and it's not common knowledge, we need a citation. For example, if I say, the world is round, well, that's not necessarily my idea. That came from others who proved that, okay, and it's not my original idea, but it is common knowledge. We all know that the world is round. So do I need a citation? No, because it's common knowledge, even though it's not my original idea. But if it's not my original idea and it's not common knowledge, what do we need? A citation. Okay? So that's the first thing we need to look at is everything that you write, every sentence that you write, ask yourself, is this an original idea or is this not original idea that is not common knowledge? Because most of what we have to write needs to be an original idea. Most of what we write needs to be an original idea. When I do this, this is my suggestion that some way, somehow, you write these down in your notes. Most of what we write needs to be an original idea. When we bring in outside sources, that's to support our original idea. All right, so we have these two ideas, original idea and a non-original idea. And we have ideas that are not original and are not common knowledge. We can cite these two different ways. Now I'm going to use the word citation or cite, the verb cite, or the noun citation, and I'm going to use the word references. What's the difference between citing or citations and references? Any ideas?
Citation is just a part of like a sentence, maybe, and reference like a whole book or article.
Okay, so think about the essay that you write. Think of the essay as having two parts. The first part is the actual body of the text, what you write, and at the bottom is what we're going to call the references. All right, so we have like two sections. Think of it as your essay, and then at the end of the essay, we have another section that's called references. All right, so in references, we're going to call those references. Those are the books, the articles that we use, right, to cite what we cite in the essay. So the citation, the cite, is in the text that's in the essay, and the references is what we're referring to at the end. That's separate from what you just wrote, but at the very end, just a list of references. Okay, and we'll see some examples of that here in a few minutes. So what I'm talking about here, ideas. When we look at direct quotes, we can look at when we cite other authors, we can either direct quote or we can paraphrase. Okay, we have two ways of doing it. We can direct quote or we can paraphrase. Now, a direct quote, what's the difference? What's a direct quote?
When you take the exact words.
Exactly. When you take the exact same words from an author, that is word for word. And what do we have to include in our direct quotes? What do we call these? Quotation marks. need to use quotation marks for direct quotes. Okay? So an example here I have, according to Smith, 2013, all teachers is based on merit. So this phrase, all teachers should get raises based on merit, is the author said the exact words, word for word. And notice I have direct quotes. So we need direct quotes when it's a direct quote, and we need quotation marks when it's a direct quote, and we use this whenever we're repeating someone else's words. Now, there's some things to keep in mind. When you look at your entire essay, we want to try to avoid having more than 15% of your direct quotes as direct quote. I'm sorry, we don't want to have more than 15% of your text direct quotes. So in other words, we want to use direct quotes sparingly. We don't want to overuse direct quotes. So if you count up all your words, and then you select all your direct quotes, just make sure you don't have more than 15% as a direct quote. Right? If you have any questions, feel free to stop me and ask. Okay? I have some things that I want to talk about, but I'd rather you ask me right now if something's not clear. Okay?
So we have to say all the time, according to blah, 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 and then we're in.
Okay. All right, so the question is, do you always have to say according to Smith and then all teachers? No. In fact, let me give you another example here. Different way that you can direct quote. So I'm going to copy this and paste. And I'm going to change this a little. I'm going to say all teachers, now this is at the beginning of the sentence, all teachers should get raises based on merit. And then in my citation, I'm going to include Smith, the year, and this paragraph. Okay, so this is the second way that you can include a direct quote. What's the difference? Well, the difference here is you're focusing on the author when you say according to Smith. When you say it this way, you're focusing on the concept. My recommendation is to focus more on concepts than the authors. So for me personally, this is more, I would recommend this way over this way. You get something. But don't have all of your quotes according to Smith. Or Ellis states that, okay, you can focus on the concepts, and it's I think is better. Okay, but either way is okay. Now there's okay. Does that answer your question? Could I say?
Yeah.
Okay. Now there's another thing to keep in mind with a direct quote, and we have to include the page number. So notice here I have according to Smith is the author's last name. All right. Don't include the first and last name. Only include the last name. Include the year in parentheses, just as I have it here, a comma, because this is kind of sentence connected. So we have a comma, and then we have what the author said. Now I want you to pay close attention. End of the sentence. Notice that I have quotation marks, space, parentheses, open paren, P period 3, close the parentheses, period. Some common mistakes. We like to put the period here at the end of the quote, but before the citation. The period goes after citation. And the page number is the page where, in this case, if it's a book or if it's an article, where the reader can find this direct quote. So direct quotes require a page number. Now I have another example where I have para. Now this is not Spanish para, this is an abbreviation for paragraph. So we use paragraph. the page number? What do you think? What do you think the difference is between this citation and this?
Paragraph, when it's something small, or
Okay.
an article.
All right. These first example might be a book or an article. We don't know. It's the same. There's no difference in the citations between books and articles. Okay, so this could be a book or it could be an article. This, however, is probably a website, because in websites we don't usually have page numbers, so we have to be able to find the text another way, and we'll use para as an abbreviation for paragraph. So if it's in the third paragraph, you put para period 3. Okay. Now, one final thing I'd like to draw your attention to is when we have a direct quote, we only want to quote interesting text. Okay? If somebody just says something that's just an ordinary speech, that's really not anything really interesting, let's just paraphrase it. Don't direct quote it. A direct quote is something that somebody says that's really interesting, that really kind of hooks the reader. Okay? So again, use direct quotes sparingly. Only direct quote when it's something really interesting. And if it's not interesting, then put it in your own words. And this brings us to our second type of citing other authors. We can paraphrase. So paraphrasing, simply taking someone else's idea and putting our own words around that idea. Okay, so we're capturing someone else's ideas, putting it in your own words. Paraphrasing, we use paraphrasing a little bit more than direct quotes. You should have more paraphrases than direct quotes. Right? Because again, we just want to limit our direct quotes. No more than 15%, which is not a lot. Okay? This is the preferred way of citing. And the difference here is when it's a paraphrase, we do not include what? The number, or if it's a website, paragraph number. It's not required. Okay?
Right.
Yeah, you write it in your own words.
On the page paragraph.
Oops. Yeah, this is a mistake. I was copy and pasting this morning. So I'm taking this out. And this is how it would look. Now, this idea, is this my idea? Is this my original idea? Is it? My original idea, not my words. Is this my idea? And how do we know that this is not my original idea? Because of the citation. Right? So, this idea is not mine, but are the words mine? Yes. So, it's someone else's idea, and I'm in my own words. And guess what? The citation is the same in the sense that we have the author's last name and we include the year. Do I need the author's first and last name? No, just his last name. Do I need the first initial? No, just the last name. All right? This is what it would look like. Educators use merit pay to constitute raises. So I tried to paraphrase. I tried to take this idea here, and I tried to use my own words here. But I'm trying to use the same idea. But I still have to have citation. But I have to include page number. Okay? Easy enough so far? All right, so these, again, are these citations or references? What I highlighted, is that a citation or a reference?
It depends on the reference, because if at the end of the essay is a reference.
So this, sorry, go ahead.
The essay is a citation.
Okay, this text that I'm highlighting right here, this text that I'm hiding right here. See this?
Pardon me? I don't know.
Do you see this text right here?
Mhm.
Okay. That's it.
Maybe-
All right. The question is this text right here, is this a citation or a reference?
I don't know.
No?
Because I did.
Citation.
In the essay.
Because imagine, right, this is only one sentence, but imagine a paragraph, right? Imagine an essay. And I wrote this one sentence inside the essay. Okay? These are citations. And the citations, you include only the author's name and the year, and it could include page number if it's a direct quote, but these are citations. References would look something like this. We'll talk more about references here in a few minutes. But these are references here. Right?
Ah.
And the references are again at the end of the essay in a separate section. Okay? So just try to keep those straight. Citations are indexed. References have a section at the very end where they list all of the references. All right? We'll talk more about references. All right, so citations. So any other questions before we move on?
No, I'm writing that for
Paraphrase, okay?
I think in Canvas, teacher,
Yes.
this information is that information in Canvas.
Yes, it's in the survival kit that's on this page.
Ah, okay.
And I sent an announcement to all of you that you probably have received your email and haven't checked yet. This one.
Okay.
Still worth taking notes and make sure you have your own personal notes to make so it's clear for you. So now, next thing I want to talk about are paragraphs, and we've talked a little bit about this. So this is probably repetition, all right? But I think it's worth mentioning again, and it is with APA. APA is not only just citations and references; it's also grammar, writing conventions, the way in which we write. Okay, so here you have. So,
may I have my Canvas hardware?
Yeah, go ahead. So here we have 3 types of paragraphs. Now, remember that. And I'll wait. Welcome. It's okay. You picked a good Okay. So remember, we're just starting Unit 3. Okay, so we're going to be asked to write an argumentative essay. And so, just like our first essay that we wrote in Unit 1, we need to recognize we have 3 types of paragraphs. So in our introduction paragraph, what are some things we need to include in our introduction paragraph? What's the very first thing, even before that? All right, so I'm going to say a hook, right? We want to hook the audience. So that very first sentence, right from the very beginning, we want to capture the audience's attention by creating a good hook. And we typically have 3 options, 3 ways in which we can create a hook. The first being a quote, right? A quote. What's another way to hook the audience? We might ask a question. We might ask a question, but a deep question, a question that really gets to think and reflect on the topic that you're going to talk about in the introduction. And the third way that we can create a hook? A statistic. A statistic. Some interesting fact that you say, wow, here's reasons, wow, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Okay? It's not any old statistic or any fact, but it's something interesting, something surprising. Now, the question is, For your hook, do we have to include a citation?
Yes.
Yes?
In order to catch the attention.
A citation.
A citation.
When do we use a
Quotation.
citation?
Is the same citation or quotation?
Okay, the question is, do we need to include a citation? What's a citation? Right, it's in parentheses, and we have like the author's last name, and we have the year, maybe we have the page number. So do we include citation?
It depends, teacher, because if we get the citation from a quotation,
If we get the citation from a quotation?
teacher, no.
Yes.
Okay. It does depend, Ariana, it does depend. The first type of hook might be a quotation. Now, do we need a citation for a quotation? I would say in general, no. Because what type of quote are we going to likely include?
Maybe very interesting.
Interesting or famous, perhaps.
Famous.
A famous quote. And the person, we need to include the person's name. Albert Einstein. Well, most of us have heard of Albert Einstein. Or Helen Keller. I mean, these people they're very famous, right? So typically we don't need to include a citation for a famous quote, but we do need to include the name. So it's the direct quote and the person's name.
And the name.
Maybe our lyrics for a song.
Could be, but just try to find, recognizable quotes. That's the thing. Is it recognizable? Right. So, yeah, I mean, it could be a famous song, but maybe the lyrics aren't all that recognizable. I mean, it depends.
All the name is love.
Well, okay, that's
You
a
can
good
say
example.
Beatles, or you can say the song like this.
Yeah, all you need is love, and you can put the Beatles if you want. Yeah. Or Lennon McCartney if you want to get technical. But
If I write respecto al derecho de la paz, where am I going to write Benito Juárez? Where?
right after the quote, I would write a dash, and then the author's full name, first name and last name. Con guión medio, and guión medio, like that's what I would make a direct quote, dash, and then the first and last name. I wouldn't typically need, I don't think we need a citation for a direct quote. A question, we don't typically need a question unless you're quoting someone. Someone else asked the question, maybe. But typically, if you just ask your own question, your own idea, you don't need a citation. A statistic or interesting fact, you will need a citation. If you say 4 out of 5 teachers, they pay X amount of pesos a year, you need a citation so others find that source. Okay, so the introduction, we start with the hook. After the hook, what comes next?
The body paragraph.
Sorry? Go ahead.
The body paragraph.
Okay, before we get to the body paragraph, what else do we include? At this point, we just have one sentence, and that's something important to remember. The hook, just leave it as one sentence. Don't, bless you, include like 3 questions as your hook. Just get a good question, and then get into the development introduction. One sentence for your hook. Then after the hook, what comes next?
Something of the problem.
Yeah, we want, and I'm going to give you different terms to think about because it's going to depend on the type of essay. But if it is some sort of problem, you want to describe or introduce the problem. Maybe you want to provide some sort of history or historic perspective about whatever it is you're going to talk about. So think of it like history. Think of it like providing some sort of context that the reader needs to be aware of before you start talking about the main idea. Okay? So in your introduction paragraph, we want to provide some sort of historical context. And then the very last sentence of your introduction is what?
And the very last,
The very last sentence.
the
The thesis statement. Now, what is a thesis statement?
This is a topic that we are going to talk about in the body part.
It's the main idea of your essay. Your thesis statement is the main idea of your essay. This is the first sentence I go to when I review an essay. I don't read anything else. I look at the beginning. I look at the first paragraph. I look right at the very last sentence to see what the main idea is. And then I say, okay. Then I go back to the hook. Does the hook have something to do with the main idea? Good. Does the introduction have something to do? Oh, okay, idea, good. Then I go to the body paragraphs. Do they have something to do with the main idea?
Sure. Oh, sorry. Who checks the essay that we do, like extraordinary?
Extraordinary.
Because I always fail it. Are you?
But your question is what? What I'm sorry.
Who is checking or directing? Who says, oh, that girl has?
Okay, the things that I'm talking about now here, okay, are fairly
The teacher
standard. Okay, I mean I didn't make this up. I mean I'm not that smart. I didn't come up with all of these things. This information is coming from other outside sources, and I don't have it listed all the sources. Okay? But it's a good question. You know, these are fairly common concepts when you go and say, okay, how do I? If you Google introduction paragraph, okay, find out what other people say about what to include in an introduction paragraph, and I bet they say more or less the same thing. It could vary a little bit. But I bet they're going to talk about a thesis statement. I bet they're going to talk about hooking the audience and talking about, you know, maybe developing some sort of historical context. They may word it differently, but all essays need a thesis statement. And usually that comes at the end of the introduction. Okay, so you know, everything that I talked about here has come somewhere else, and so.
There was the essay are based in this aspect, are based in that aspect.
Yeah, okay, what I'm talking about really is for my classes now, if we want to get, you know, most of, I think the teachers here at the university recognize this also and grade it accordingly, okay, but, you know, I don't know exactly what everybody else does, but again, everything that we talk about here is fairly common. I think most of us can agree on everything that we see. But obviously, in fact, this is one of the reasons why that I record this too. This is a live recording. It's going out to YouTube because I want to get other opinions too and see what other teachers are doing. See if I'm full of baloney or if what I'm talking about has some merit. Okay, so most of the topics here, I think, and go ahead and I encourage all of you to Google this. How do I write a body paragraph? Google it. How to write a conclusion paragraph? Google it. See what they say. And obviously, that is something we can talk about. If you say, well, this person says this, how come we're doing it like this? And that's fine. We'll have that discussion. Okay. But what we're talking about here is things that I've been used to explaining to my classes and based on what I've read and how I write as well. I mean, when I write, I've written a lot of essays, and everything that I'm talking to you about is what I do, what I've done, and what teachers have graded my work on. And so, you know, this is kind of where I'm coming from, and I don't think it's really out of the ordinary as far as what, you know, if you do what I'm talking about here, I think in pretty good shape for just about the essay that you write. Now, I am talking about academic writing. I'm not talking about creative writing, writing poetry, writing love letters to your significant other. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about writing for a newspaper. This is academic writing for writing essays, essentially. And a lot of your classes, you will be asked to write an essay, and it'll say, according to APA. So when you say according to APA and you have to write an essay, it doesn't matter what the class is. These concepts, I think, will direct you in a very good way if you do what we talked about here.
because my academic life depends on essays. I have to present it to last,
Yeah.
and it's my third opportunity.
Okay.
So I do.
Well, obviously, I'm presenting this here now, and, this is going to be made available. I post a lot of information online, but obviously, if any one of you has direct questions, very specific questions, and you want to contact me, that's fine. You can also, I'm sure, contact other teachers here at the university, but ask. That's the main thing with APA. Try to do your research, do your best, and then ask questions, either with me or someone else, another teacher, to make sure that you're doing the things right. And with APA, it's not difficult, but there are a lot of details. Right? But it's really not that difficult once you kind of get through it and just practice with it. The first time I started writing essays, I was horrible with APA. I made mistakes, and I got corrected. They said, change this, the period goes here, It's just a process, it's a learning process. Okay, so we have introduction paragraph. We start with the hook. We provide some sort of historical context. And the last sentence is the most important sentence of your essay, and that is the thesis statement. And how many sentences is your thesis statement? One. Okay. So, introduction paragraph. Moving on now to body paragraph. Now, we've talked about body paragraph quite a bit, and I like to use the acronym MIL-PLAN. Now, if you do a search on how to develop body paragraphs, not everybody's going to call it the MIL-PLAN, but this is an easy acronym. Since I like to eat, I like food, meal kind of really resonates with me. I remember it well, and it helps me develop paragraphs, and I think it'll help you too. The M stands for the main idea or the topic sentence. So I think it's to your advantage to try to start each paragraph with a topic sentence. The very first sentence should be a topic sentence. Now, if you do some research and you Google it, some may say that the topic sentence can go somewhere else. But for our purposes, right, I would recommend that everyone write the very first sentence as the main idea, the topic sentence. The second letter of the acronym E stands for evidence. Now think of evidence as what? Just details, examples that you want to provide that supports the main idea. We have analyze. So some of our sentences we're going to analyze. We may compare and contrast the evidence to some other paragraph. We might compare and contrast within the same paragraph. If we have a couple of examples, we might compare and contrast those. We might also explain the rationale behind the evidence, how it links back to the main idea. We have to connect the dots. What's the relationship? That's an analyzed sentence. Okay, just because you include examples doesn't necessarily mean that the reader is going to be able to say, well, there's an example, but why is that an example? So you answer that question. Why is it an example? Because of these things, you are analyzing the evidence. And then the very last sentence of your body paragraph should be what? A link, or I also put it in my notes, a summary. Now, if you have, let's say, a 5-paragraph essay, how many body paragraphs are you going to have? 3. So let's say that you are working on your first paragraph, and you know you've got another paragraph coming up. That last sentence of your first body paragraph is going to be what? The very last sentence of the first body paragraph is going to be a link that links the idea from this paragraph to the next paragraph. The same way with the second body paragraph. Now, the third body paragraph is the last body paragraph, right? For the conclusion. So maybe the last sentence of your third body paragraph might be a summary. It's not going to be a link necessarily, right? You could also look at it as being a summary. Okay. Think of a link as linking it to the next paragraph or simply linking it to some other part of the essay. Also. And so we have our meal plan here. We may have a couple of evidence sentences. We may have 1 or 2 analyzed sentences. For our purposes, I think our paragraphs, our body paragraphs, in fact, all of our paragraphs should be at least 5 sentences as a general rule for us, for this class. I would say anywhere between 5 to 8 sentences as a general rule. Okay, these are very general. Okay, but I think if we keep it between 5 and 8 sentences, we'll be in good shape. What we want to avoid are paragraphs that have 1 or 2 sentences. Okay, sometimes I get paragraphs that are 1 sentence. And it's a long sentence, there's like 5 or 6 lines of text. But there's a comma, and then there's a comma, and there's a comma, and a comma, and a comma, and a comma. Before you know it, there's a long sentence, but it's all 1 sentence. So we want to try to make sure we have paragraphs that are roughly 5 to 8 sentences. Now, a couple of things to remember in a body paragraph is typically the first and the last sentence do not have citations. That is the original idea. The topic sentence, that very first sentence, should be your own original idea, and then after, create citations to support your idea. So as a general rule, I would try to avoid, in most cases, including citations in the topic sentence and at the end, the linking sentence. That should be your main idea. And what's the hardest sentence to write in your body paragraphs? What's the hardest sentence to write in your body paragraphs? The very hard, the most difficult, the sentence, the type of sentence that most students have the most problems with.
Which one?
In your body paragraph, which sentence, the main idea, evidence, analyze, or link, which type of sentence do you think causes the most difficulty for most of the students writing a body paragraph? Well, the options are.
The what?
The options are the main idea, the topic sentence, evidence, analyze, or link. What's the most difficult of the body paragraph? I'm only talking about the body paragraph right here.
The most difficult?
Uh-huh.
The link?
Nope.
The main idea?
The main idea, believe it or not. You wouldn't think so. But the most difficult thing to do is writing a good topic sentence. One sentence that talks about one idea. Remember paragraph, you develop one idea. Think of the topic sentence of a paragraph like the thesis statement of your essay. The topic sentence is that one idea, and we have to make sure that all the supporting sentences all talk about just that one little idea. Okay. So just try to keep that in mind. Sometimes what happens is we finish a paragraph and we review it, we look at it again, and then we ask ourselves, you know what, this topic sentence, I need to change it a little bit because I started writing about some other things here. Sometimes we have to go back and modify the topic sentence. Sometimes we have to go back and modify the supporting sentences. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that those topic sentences and the supporting sentences align. They talk about the same thing. Okay, moving on. Conclusion paragraph. Everything's in threes, right? In conclusion, we have to remember 3 things. What do we start off in the conclusion paragraph? What's the first sentence?
Restate. Thesis statement.
So we're going to actually restate, we're going to repeat the thesis statement. So the thesis statement, the main idea of your essay occurs in 2 places. Where does it occur? The thesis statement occurs in 2 places in your essay. Where's the first place that it occurs?
In the introductory paragraph.
And where in the introduction paragraph? At the very last sentence. And it also occurs where?
The conclusion.
The first sentence of your conclusion paragraph. Okay? Now, something to remember is we're not going to copy and paste the thesis statement. We're going to reword it. It's the same idea. Rephrase it, reword it, but it's the exact same idea. Now, after we have our restated thesis statement, we want to talk about the significance of what we just wrote. What's the big idea? Right? What you just wrote apply to other contexts. You want to kind of give more of a general view, what the big idea of whatever you wrote, and you want to include that in your conclusion. And here's a note that I didn't include here is, in your conclusion paragraph, we don't want to include any citations. We can include citations in our introduction. We need to include citations in our body paragraphs, but in the conclusion paragraph, no citations, nothing new.
Because we must include citations. We must.
When, where, and
So because I don't like, I prefer write if I don't for about the topic.
okay.
And we must
Well-
at least one or two citations per essay.
Okay. So the question is, do we have to use citations? Right? So what I'm talking about today is academic writing. Okay. I'm specifically talking about this now because for our class, third semester writing here at the university, we have to write for Unit 3, we have to write a persuasive or an argumentative essay. And so for us, for our purposes, we are going to include citations. Essay, we did not include citations.
But
So for the assignment, we are going to include citations. Now, your question is, I don't want to use my own original ideas. I don't want to include citations. So to answer your question, you need to make sure whatever assignment you are doing, you need to ask your teacher or your instructor who or how many citations. First of all, do you need to include citations? And if so, how many? Right? So every teacher, every assignment will have a criteria. They'll say, okay, yes, you do. You need to include 5 or 6 or whatever. I'm going to tell you. For our purposes, we'll talk about that more in detail, but later, because this is more of a general discussion. But for our purposes, we are going to include citations. Okay, and I'm even going to say what type of references that we need to include. But every teacher, every assignment will be a little bit different. So whenever you're doing an extraordinary exam or any type of essay for any type of purpose, you need to clarify that. And they should be in the guidelines, or they should be in the syllabus, or they should be instructions that the teacher gives you so that you know for sure how many you need to include. Now, let's say you know that you have to include citations. If you know you have to include citations, you need to have at least one citation in every body paragraph, for sure. You're probably going to have at least one citation in your introduction. When you talk about the context, you may, reference a problem that somebody else says.
Yes, teacher, because it is argumentative, not narrative. In argumentative, we must use citations.
I'm not going to say that, okay? But for, because in narrative, you can also include citations, if you want to support something. I mean, the narrative is first person. You're talking about a personal experience, but you could include a citation. If you're just telling a story, maybe not, But in an argumentative essay, which is what we're going to focus on, it's really a key part of forming the argument, because I want you to have strong arguments where you are bringing in outside sources, because it makes your argument that much stronger. If you just share your own ideas, then your argument is not as strong as if you can support it from experts.
Teacher, by writing citations makes our essay more format incredible.
Exactly. That's what we want. We want it to credible. We want a valid and reliable, unbiased argument that that has a lot of support. And how do we bring in support? Is bring in outside sources. Right? Okay. So. Finally, the last thing to include in our closing conclusion paragraph is a closing statement. Okay, this is just one statement that kind of summarizes the whole thing. Okay, you might tie in a closing statement with one of the direct quotes that you had at the very beginning. Kind of brings it full circle. That's a very popular way of doing it. Is kind of going back to what you talked about in the introduction to kind of close the idea, to finalize the idea. Okay? But you want to have some sort of one, sentence that kind of closes and concludes what you want to talk about.
with a good message.
Maybe it's kind of the moral of the story, you know, or maybe, you know, it's almost like a hook in a sense, because you're kind of, you want to have something really that grabs the attention, but it's to close the idea, it's to really conclude the idea. All right, so we have our introduction paragraph, body paragraph, conclusion. Those are the three types of paragraphs that we need to include in our essays. Okay, and we want to try to include these aspects. Now, moving on. I'm going to talk a little bit about editing. Now, remember that writing is a process. Okay, and whatever we write, we're going to start with the first draft, and then we're going to make edits, and we're going to improve. So remember that anything that we write to understand, and we write to be understood. So when we start writing, we're just writing to understand. We're just trying to get our thoughts together, and we might use outlines, we might use mind maps, we might use, we might brainstorm, make lists, categorize keywords. You know, there's a variety of ways that we can write to understand, and this is for us just to kind of get some ideas about how we can put in order our thoughts. And then we want to write to be understood, and then that's when we want to try to make sure we express the idea that we have to others. And the hardest thing sometimes to do when you're writing is to assume that what you write, for you it's very clear, because you have the already in your mind. But you have to try to put yourself into the reader's shoes, say, okay, if I'm on this, am I going to be understood? And explaining myself enough so others can understand me. And so this is something to think about whenever we are writing and we do the writing process here. Now, so a couple of tips that I like to do. This is what I do when I first start reading essays, and this is what I tell my students to do. When you finish writing your first draft, so you have your 5 paragraphs, for example, if it's a 5-paragraph essay, look at the 2 thesis statements. The thesis statement in the last sentence of your introduction paragraph and the first sentence of your conclusion, and compare them. Copy and paste them, put them next to each other, and say, okay, am I saying the same thing? Is it clear about what I'm saying in these 2 sentences? Do I need to change something? But do a side-by-side comparison. And then, once you've done that, look at each topic sentence and ask yourself, do the topic sentences support the thesis statement? Just take out those sentences, copy and paste them, move them over, and say, okay, am I talking about the same thing? Is it logical? Is it logical that I started with this first body paragraph first, and then the second body paragraph? Or maybe I need to change the order. Okay? But just look at the topic sentences and the thesis statements, and from there you can kind of get an idea about the structure, and if you are organizing your essay or trying to make it as coherent as possible so that it follows some sort of logical order. Okay? Make sure that you look at your body paragraphs to make sure that you are that you have unity, that you have coherence, and that you have cohesion. I think we've talked about these 3. Unity is what? What do we mean by unity?
I'm talking about one thing.
Talking about one thing. So make sure that the supporting sentences are talking about the main idea or supporting the main idea, that you're not getting off topic. Coherence, what do we mean by coherence? Some sort of logical order. So if you're talking about putting ideas chronologically, ask yourself, okay, does this make sense? Am I going in order, or am I jumping around? Okay, and it can be, historically speaking, it can be from a long time ago up to the current day, or it can be vice versa. Coherence could also be moving from the general to the specific, specific to the general, the largest to the smallest, smallest to the largest. It could be some sort of process, right? If you're talking about some sort of logical process, does it follow some sort of order, a meaningful order? Okay, this is coherence. And we have cohesion. And there's two main ideas, key ideas that we want to remember for cohesion. Again, thinking about moving from one sentence to the next. What have we been working on with regard to cohesion?
Connecting ideas with theme and rain.
Okay, so connecting ideas with rhyme and theme, and we have two general patterns for rhyme and theme. You recall those two common patterns?
Connectors.
Okay, but if we start, first of all, talking about rhyme and theme, what are the two patterns if we're moving from one sentence to the next? Same theme, new rhyme. So moving from one sentence to the next, we can use the same theme and offer new rhyme, or we can change the rhyme from the prior sentence and change it to the theme of the current sentence. Those are two typical ways that we can connect ideas. This is rhyme and theme, and we're looking at trying to be more cohesive in our writing. The second way that we can connect the ideas between sentences with cohesion is through the use of transitional words, and we have, and what type of transitional words specifically?
Connector.
What type of connectors?
Subjunctive. Subjunctive convoys.
Nella?
Sentence connectors.
Sentence connectors. Now, where are sentence connectors typically? Where do they occur in a sentence? Where do sentence connectors typically occur in the sentence? Where does it typically occur? The sentence connectors?
When we are talking about two independent.
Does it occur at the beginning? Does it occur in the middle? Or does it occur at the end? Sentence connectors typically.
At the beginning of the sentence.
Usually, bless you, it occurs at the beginning. If you have, does anybody have your list of sentence connectors? Yeah. If you look at a list of sentence connectors, most of those occur at the beginning. Some examples of some sentence connectors?
Until.
Sorry?
Until. Hola. La función que no me acuerdo. Until. O por ejemplo.
Hablar.
On the other hand.
Okay, on the other hand is one. As a result, comma, you could say, you could say additionally, because if you say in addition, you might want to say in addition to this, maybe. Or additionally, you could say moreover. In other words, comma.
Teacher, how do you pronounce until? Until. Aunque.
How do you spell it?
No, aunque. En español.
Aunque, although.
Although.
Although. Yes. Now, although is although a sentence connector. What is although?
Aunque contrast.
Translate, however.
Even.
Although, can I just say although, comma,
Yes.
although,
Aunque.
well, let's see. Yeah, although, yeah, you can say that. You can say that. I was thinking some words can also be a subordinated conjunction, right? So you can say although I didn't have time to study, right? Or you can say although, comma, and then it could be a sentence connector. So that's why these lists help you kind of distinguish between subordinating conjunctions and sentence connectors. Although, yes, it can be a sentence. I had to think about that for a minute because I'm used to it being a subordinated conjunction, but it also can be a sentence connector. And that's also why commas are very important. And we can see when we need to use commas for subordinating subordinating clauses and also sentence connectors. Remembering that we need to use a comma after sentence connectors and also subordinating clauses when they come first, when they precede main clauses. Okay. So we have cohesion, coherence, and unity for our body paragraphs. We want to try to make sure that we follow those. Now, we've got some miscellaneous points here. How are we doing on time? We're doing well. Okay. So, some of these things we've talked about in class, but it's worth mentioning again. Some things to keep in mind. The active voice. We want to try to write in the active voice. It's preferred. Now, this doesn't mean that we can never write in the passive voice. We can write in the passive voice, but it should be preferred. The active voice should be preferred. We want to try to stick to writing actively, active verbs, and we specifically want to try to avoid phrases like, it has been seen, it has been found, it has been determined, it has been researched. That is the non-referential it, and then the passive voice, right? It's very common, right? But it's very easy to fix. If you have, it has been found that teachers make more money than someone else. How do we fix it? We just take it out. Instead of saying, it has been found that teachers make more money, we just say, teachers make more money. Now, it's a short example, but that's all you have to do is take it out. You don't have to reword the sentence. You just take it out. And you just changed it from being a passive sentence to an active sentence.
But for me, it sounds more formal when you say it's being done.
Right. And that's why we use it, because it sounds really educated and sounds really like profound. And, but we want, but the active voice is preferred. Right, and it actually brings your writing to life. I mean, it sounds more, it sounds better, it sounds, that it just sounds more descriptive, more active, sounds better. And again, this is not me speaking, this is APA. In fact, I don't have the book with me, but in APA, it says active voice is preferred. So that's what we're going to try to do, is write more in the active, being careful with the passive voice and only using it when it's absolutely necessary. But the most common mistake by far, it has been found. It has been seen. The non-referential it. We want to avoid certain constructions. There's certain words that we just want to try to avoid as a general rule. Again, just to improve our writing, just to make our writing more descriptive, more active, more fluid, more interesting. And here are some of the words that came to mind this morning when I was putting together these notes about what we can try to avoid. Let's try to avoid the word very. It's very strange that teachers make so much money. It's very strange. You just say it's strange. Just take the word out. Importance. Now, when I say important, I also mean importance. Importantly, any version of the word important, try to avoid it. Okay? Just everything you write is important. Okay? If it's not important, don't write it, right? So everything should add value. So we want to try to avoid this word. We want to try to avoid these phrases. It is important. It is necessary. It is essential, etc. Right? Take them out. We don't need it. Right?
Multi-word.
Now, I'm sorry?
What's multi-word unit?
Multi-word units, or another word for that is collocations. It's word groups. And think of more like idiomatic expressions. Maybe I should put multi-word units as idiomatic. How about this? I'll put idiomatic multi-word units. So those are like collocations and that are idiomatic. That includes phrasal verbs. Okay? If you say, someone threw up last night. Well, instead of saying throwing up, we might say someone vomited, right? And then that just sounds better. It's literal. Everybody knows what vomit is. Maybe some people don't know what throw up is, right? If it's very a local term. So we want to try to avoid idiomatic expressions, and multi-word units are simply phrases, words, collocations that go together. So we also want to avoid absolutes like always, never, and I didn't include this. Prove. This proves that. No. Because in anything, in any type of human science, right, behavior, you can't really prove anything. There's always exceptions. So even statistically, we can say we statistically prove something. That's okay, because we're putting the word statistics in front of it. But we can't really prove anything in life, right? Because there are always exceptions. We want to try to avoid overusing the verb to be. You can use the verb to be, but don't overuse it. There are many wonderful verbs in the English language that we can use and substitute a lot of times, again, to make the writing more descriptive, more fluid, more dynamic.
The verb get, I think, is informal because we use it in get. And I think that we overuse get also is informal.
I mean, you could overuse anything, and I'm trying to think of an example. Do you have an example that you're thinking of with get? I get up, like as in
Getting over.
getting over. Okay, so I'm getting over the fact that I failed my exam. I'm getting over. Getting over is an idiomatic expression. So for me personally, it's not so much the word get, but the phrase get over. It is idiomatic. Now, most people know what get over is, and a lot of, so I'm not sure, if you'll have too much of a problem using that example. But you want to be careful not to use a lot of idiomatic expressions. If you say, I'm getting over the fact that I failed my exam, you could say, I'm recovering from, or I am feeling. There are other ways that you could actually be more descriptive that could replace get over. So perhaps there are a lot of idiomatic expressions with the word get. But to be honest, I haven't seen much of a problem with get with most of the students that I've had. Most of what I see here, in fact, everything that I'm talking about today is based on the same things that I've been seeing, like very common issues. And I haven't seen too much of a problem with get. But, yeah.
Instead of phrasal verbs or whatever, we can. So all the phrasal verb has synonyms.
And I'm not going to say all phrasal verbs, okay? But if you use a phrasal verb, just ask yourself, okay, is this really a colloquial? Is this a idiomatic expression? I mean, is there another way that I can say it that's really more direct, that's literal, right? And so, I'm not going to say all phrasal verbs, but a lot of phrasal verbs are idiomatic. Most of them are idiomatic. So just kind of think about it, right? And it's not a huge problem, but it's something that I wanted to add to my list, and that I want you guys to think about. Okay, so the verb overused, the verb to be. Okay, it was found. This is what I was talking about earlier. It was seen. It was determined. We want to avoid that. And I mentioned here in the topic sentence right here. Check each body paragraph, the topic sentence in each body paragraph. Make sure you have a good, strong subject and a dynamic verb. A verb that is not the verb to be. A dynamic verb. In the topic sentence specifically, we want a good, strong subject and a dynamic verb. I would avoid typically writing there are sentences as the topic sentence. In writing there are sentences, use it sparingly. Don't use it too much. Why? Because where's the subject? There are chairs in this room. What's the subject? In the center. Chairs. Where is the word chairs? Well, it's not at the beginning, is it? There are chairs in the room. we don't have the subject at the beginning. The topic sentence, we want a good subject right at the very beginning of the sentence. Because we want to know right away what that main idea is. And then we want a good verb, any dynamic verb that's not the verb to be.
Having a good verb, it makes a very dynamic.
I'm sorry?
Having a good verb since the beginning of the sentence, it makes a dynamic topic sentence, correct?
Yes. Yes, it makes it more descriptive. Right? You know, because typically the verb to be is basically to describe something, right? Or define something, or, you know, you might use it later on in your supporting sentences. But try to come up with good topic sentences that have good dynamic verbs where the subject is at the beginning. Okay, we've talked about many types of errors in this class, but we want to really focus on three. The three I think are the maybe the most common, or at least I think the most serious, I guess, if we want to call it that, is run-on sentences, sentence fragments, and comma splices. Okay, so those are the main three errors that we want to try to avoid. Now there are others. Obviously, we've talked about other errors in this class, but those are, I think, the three that I see most common, especially comma splices. When we have really, really long sentences, we just throw a comma and then we keep going. We throw another comma and we keep going with the same sentence. Remember that the only way to end a sentence is with a period, question mark, or exclamation mark, that a comma does not end the sentence. So this is a big difference, or a main difference, between writing in Spanish and writing in English. Because it's very common to use commas and you keep developing that sentence, and that's the preferred way to write. That's a good way to write. And as a result, you have really long sentences. But English, it's a little bit different. All right? It's not quite the same. We want more concise, shorter sentences compared typically to writing in Spanish.
Teacher, what does bullet mean?
Bullet.
Bullet.
Bullet points. Bullet points, whenever you have a list of things, a bullet, like these are bullets. These are bullets. These are bullets. These are bullets. Bullet points. Okay? ¿Vamos bien? Okay. I know it's a lot of information. Okay, so we have here, let's see, avoid capitalization. Sometimes, a very common mistake, very, very common. We like to capitalize words for emphasis. So we write, learning English language acquisition. English with capitalization, right? Because it's a proper noun. English language acquisition. Language and acquisition, mayúscula. With capital letters. Right? It's important, right? But we don't want to capitalize just to emphasize words. We capitalize proper nouns. Right? We capitalize the first word of sentences. We capitalize, you know. Titles. We have certain rules for titles, headings.
Or the names of institutions or names of companies.
Right, those are proper nouns. Yeah. We capitalize Adriana. That's a name.
Yes.
Right, that we capitalize. We capitalize the months of the year, the weeks, the days of the week. But we don't capitalize just to emphasize. And we also don't put text in bold to emphasize. The only text in bold are headings.
We must have, when we were writing, a lot of resource in order to avoid many aspects.
And one thing that, you know, there are many ways you can do this, okay? If it's easier, you can maybe either print this out, this document that we're looking at, look at your notes. We've talked in class about do's and don'ts, and we'll continue working with do's and don'ts lists. But the idea is, until we get really used to this, if it looks like, wow, there's a lot of things here we need to remember, we'll just have your list with you. And when you fit your list, whether it's this list or your do's or don'ts, and when you write, just look at your list and see if you're doing what you need to do. After a while, you won't have to refer to your list anymore. You'll have it right here. But if at the first, you have to look at your list and say, okay, am I doing the things, and check each one by one. Okay, moving on. When citing, focus more on concepts than on authors. So this is going back, this point here is going back to my example earlier, is this is preferred over this. This is preferred over this. See how the difference between these two? Okay. This is preferred, the second way, where we focus more on the concepts and the authors in the citation than focusing on the author, where the author's name is outside the citation. Okay, so that's what I mean by that. This is a preferred way of doing it, when we focus on the actual concept, not so much the author. Make sure, now we're going to go, I'm going to talk now talk about references, and this will be kind of concluding our talk today with APA. Make sure that we alphabetize our references by the author's last name. So as an example, here is a list of references. And imagine that you have text above, okay, and you have your references. You're going to have a heading that's called references. And this is going to be a heading that's going to be centered to the page, and it's going to be in bold text, because we know that bold, headings are in bold, and headings are the only thing that's in bold. So we have our references section, and notice that the author's last name, the references are alphabetized by the author's last name. See? So this has to come before this, and so on. I have single-spaced each of the references, and I have double-spaced between each reference. That's what I would do. APA allows for both. You can do it like this, or you can double-space everything. But I like this presentation a little bit better, and I think it looks better that way. Now notice this. The first line is all the way to the left. The second line, there's a half-inch indentation. Now, it's very easy to do this in Google Drive, just as it is in Word. If you select the text, you can go up here at the top of up here, let's say you had it like this, right? You can select all of your references, go up here to your arrows, move them over a half an inch, and this is a half an inch. You need to make sure that you're in inches, pulgadas, and not centimeters, because it's not an exact centimeter. It's like, I don't know what it is, 0.125 or something. And then you want to move the top bar over like that. And then see how I just moved all my text over? And you're done. And let's say you add another reference, it's going to remember the formats. So if you type in your next reference, here, I'm moving kind of slow. See how it automatically saves the format. Okay? And you can include another space, and you're done for the next reference. So copy and paste this, and then move your text. Now notice that this format at the top is only specific to references, because I only selected the reference section. If I move my cursor up here before the section, notice how it goes back to the normal format. So this works really nice, and it works the same way in Microsoft Word. So we can set and format text by section. All right. Moving on. Now we have, what else? I mentioned Times New Roman, right? Times New Roman, font size 12 for all text. Times New Roman, font size 12. Now here's some examples of references. Remember the differences between citations and references? Now we're going to talk about references. And I have 4 examples of very common references that you'll probably use here at the university. These are the 4 most common. There are many others, right? But for our purposes for today, we'll just talk about 4. One is how to reference a book. So I have some examples here, and this is what makes APA very difficult. So I'm going to go down here and look at the book for Vygotsky. This is a book. What do we start off with? Author's last name, followed by a comma, space. Then the first letter of the author's first name, or the first initial, followed by a period, space, open paren, the year, close the parentheses, followed by a period, space. I see, this is what makes APA difficult. What do we need? Periods, commas, spaces, all these little things, but it matters. So in your notes, do whatever you need to do to make notes here about making sure you have all the, it's not the first name complete, no. Right? It's not the first name first, it's the last name first, then the first initial, year. Now, this is a book reference. What do we have here? The title of the book. And what type of text is it? Italics. Italics. So, in a book, what do we italicize? The name of the book, followed by period, space. London, England. It could also be New York, New York. It could also be St. Louis, Missouri. It could also be Dallas, Texas. What comes first? The city, comma, space. In this case, England, okay, is the country. If it's in the United States, it's going to be what? City and state. Okay, so if it's Dallas, Texas, it's Dallas, comma, TX. Now, in the U.S., we abbreviate with 2 letters all of the states. Most of them are pretty easy. New York, but you may just remember that the states are abbreviated and whenever we reference these. Followed by, after the city, or the country in this case, a colon, a space, and then the publisher. The publisher followed by a period. This is an example of a book. Author's last name, first initial. Year, the title of the book, italicized. City and state, colon, and the publisher finishing with a period. This is how you cite a book. I'm sorry, this is a reference, not a citation. This is a reference for a book. Another example for, now let's look at an article. Let's look at this one. Conlon, this first example. This is an example of an article for a journal. Okay? This is different. We start off very much the same. Author's last name. Now look here, we have 2 authors. So we have the first initial, period, and then the and. Last name, comma, first initial, period, and then the year. If we have 3 authors, it's the same. It's the author, and then period, and then comma, because it's 3, so we have to use the serial commas. Second author, first initial, comma, and third author, first initial, period. Then we have the year. Now, what is this? Current challenges in development evaluation. What do you think this is? This isn't, what do you think?
The name of the newspaper.
Okay, this is a journal, so think of this as an article inside a journal. What do you think that this would be? Is this the name of the journal or the name of the article?
The article.
The name of the article. Do we italicize the name of the article?
No.
No. Period, space, then what follows? The name of the journal. What do you notice about the name of the journal?
Italics.
It's in italics. Period, I'm sorry, comma after the journal, followed by the volume number, and then the issue number, which is in parentheses. All journals have volume numbers. Most journals also have issue numbers. This issue number is optional. If it has an issue number, you use it. If it doesn't have an issue number, you don't include it. Only. Notice that the issue number is not italicized. Notice that there's no space between the volume number and issue number. And we finish. We continue with the comma after the issue number. Space, and we have page numbers for the article, not where you found the quotes or the paraphrase. It's the article. How, what are the page numbers of the entire article? Here, period. Now, a DOI, they just started using DOI over the last few years. This is just an electronic number. All the journals are registered now using these series. But the DOI is optional. If it has a DOI, use it. If it doesn't, you can leave this out. You can finish with page numbers with a period at the end. So DOI is optional. Issue number is also optional. If it has it, include it. If they don't include it. This is an article for a journal. Notice the differences between that and the book, especially what you italicize. In everything you do, in anything that you upload, you italicize something. So we need to know what we have to italicize and not to italicize. In books, we italicize the name of the book. In the article, we italicize the name of the journal. Do this.
You need to put a period at the end of the reference to the journal.
The DOI?
After the numbers, do we need to?
Okay, if the question, the question is, do we include a period here at the end of the DOI number for a journal? No. But if it doesn't have a DOI number, do we include a period at the end with the page number? Yes.
Teacher, excuse me, what was the number 14 in parentheses 2?
14, what's 14?
Volume.
The volume number. The volume. Volume. Sometimes they abbreviate it VOL, like, if you look at the article, maybe it'll have VOL, or maybe it'll say volume.
The volume.
The
volume number, for example, is the number 2 of 14. Volume number 2 of 14?
No, it's volume 14, issue number 2. Volume number 14, issue number 2. So again, you just, it'll say, it'll be very obvious if they have it, okay? It'll have all of this information on the article itself, usually at the bottom or at the very beginning of the article. Okay, any other questions so far?
If it's a journal is like a newspaper?
No, journal is different than a newspaper. Journal would be like Mextisol Journal. I don't know if you've seen Mextisol journals.
Like magazine?
No, magazines are different. Magazine would be like Time Magazine, and there's a different way to do that. All of the journals, like in EBSCO, remember we talked about EBSCO at the very top here? This database. This is a very common, very useful database for you to find articles based on language. Okay, I mean they have general education also, but you can find a lot of good articles. All the articles in here are based in journals, and journals are publications, scholarly journals where authors are publishing right? So it's not a magazine. A magazine you have like, you have reporters. It's like for news and things. But a journal is more specific to a certain type of area. For example, language learning. We have ELT journal. Maybe in next class I'll bring some examples. I'll bring some journals I have in my office, and I'll show you some examples of journals. But these databases are all journals, right? And there you'll find, in fact, let me just show you real quick an example. If we go into the university library, we still have time, right? Yeah. If you go in here and go into Biblioteca, and you go into Biblioteca Digital por suscripción, we have a list of different databases. And one of my favorites is EBSCO. You go into EBSCO and academic search, you have to enter your information. It's not open to the public, but because you're students, you all have access to this database. And this is kind of the information here. You have all you entered into the virtual library, or some of this? Okay. All right. So this is what it looks like. Now, let's say I want to do a search. Now, there's one thing that's very important whenever you're doing a search in one of these databases is to indicate that you're looking for a complete text, texto completo, and you're also looking for peer-reviewed scholarly articles, como artículos arbitrados or something like that, or publicaciones académicas. You have to select these. By default, they're not selected. So every time you go in, you have to select these. And this will filter through all of the vast number of articles and give you only articles that you have full access to, because you don't have access to every article in this database. So let's say that I'm interested in English, right? So I'll put in some keywords here, and I'm looking for language, and I want to find something on assessment. So you can use these keywords, and a lot of times it's kind of trial by error. You just keep trying different keywords until you get enough articles that you're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and click Buscar or Search, and hopefully I'll find some articles. Now look, notice here, each of these articles has texto completo, PDF. These PDFs you can download, save them on your computer, on your thumb drive, right? You can print them out and keep them with you. And we'll talk more in class about how we'll work with these databases for our assignment. But this is how it works. You just click on the PDF and you have full access to the article. Now, all of these articles are from journals. Most of them are from journals. I don't think, in fact, every time I found articles, they've been from journals. They haven't been from magazines or newspapers. Now, this is an article that I have full access to, right? So I have the whole article. Now, let's look at the reference, right? Because I want to create a reference for this. Well, here's the name of the article. We need that. Here are the authors. Well, we need that. And all right, there's several ways to do this. One way, I'm just looking here. Okay, here's the information you need right here. Here's the name of the journal. Journal of Speech, Language, and Hearing Reference. Volume 56. Notice that it doesn't have an issue number. It's okay. It's on, looks like page 1 through 12. Is that true? Looks like it. This is page 8. February, we don't need this. February 2013 necessarily. Okay? But there's the information we need. See, we need this information, and we need the authors, and we need the title of the article. Okay? That's where we get the information. And that's the information that we include in this section here. Sorry. Here. I didn't see a DOI number, so if it doesn't have a DOI, you can leave it out. Questions? Okay. Now we also have websites. Now I just included a generic website here, just as an example. But the websites, we still want to look for an author. So if the website has an author, we start with an author's last name, first initial, the year, the title of the page. Now this is the title not of the website, but of the page wherever it is. The actual page of the website. Period. And then the title of the website. Okay, so we have the title of the page and the title of the website. And then we write retrieve from, and then we copy and paste the URL, the link. No period. A period at the end here. This is a mistake. Oops. So we don't need a period at the end of the link. Okay. Now, if there's no date, sometimes web pages don't have dates. We want to type in, instead of the year, N, lowercase, N, period, D, period, for no dates. N, period, D, period, for no date. Here. If the author, we start with the title of the page. We just bring that forward. Okay? We title of the page over. See? I know it's late. I know I've been talking a lot. I have information here. But the easiest way to do this is to find an example. If Google, for example, Purdue University Online Library, OWL, it's a really good site for writing. And you get a lot of examples of books, articles, and websites. And what you do is print those out, bring them with you whenever you're writing. Just look at an example. See what comes first, what comes next, where is the punctuation, where is the spacing, what is italicized, and just by looking at an example. Because it's very difficult, if not impossible, to remember everything the first time. Yes.
Can you write what you say if you don't see the website, the date? So
Yeah, so if there's no date, then you would change this date to N period D period. I see. Now, this is important because sometimes the web pages don't have the dates, but the website on the main page has a date. So always look at the website. If it doesn't appear on the web page, go to the main site and look at the bottom, look at the top, look around. If you find a date, then use that date. Okay, any other questions so far?
when you say title of the page, is the title of the document?
Yeah, like, let me see if I can find an example. I don't know. So let's say I want to look for a website here, crashing. Well, maybe. Okay, it doesn't look like it's going to. Okay, so let's say that, looking at this page, okay, well, let's see if this works. this is a website. Let's say you find something here that you want to use as a reference. This would be the title of the page. Okay, I would use this as the title of the page. Now, if you look up here, the main website, the domain, is www.sk.com.br. So let's take a look. I hope this is we're not really connected here, but sometimes you have to go to the main page to find the date. That's my point. Okay. That's basically it. There's one more